Welcome back. Let's find out more about rebranding hell.
Take the word faith.
Please.
Today, the word means almost the opposite of what it used to mean, okay? You ask most people today, what does the word faith mean? And they will tell you something like, it means belief without evidence. That's what they think it means.
Well, I know that's not what you think it means, but that's the point, isn't it? What it actually means when you say it, by all indications, is pretty much the same thing as belief without evidence. When Christians talk about having faith, that is what they're describing. And then they'll loudly argue that, no, that's not what I mean! That's not how I define that word! Well, then why, every time you bring it up, does that seem to be exactly what's going on? Why does it seem to be what's demanded? It's not that people necessarily defined that word that way in the first place. The reason people say that's what it means is because that's what they see it being used to describe, even if you insist otherwise. And you can change the word to any other word you want, but the result's going to be the same. They're going to look at what you're doing, what you're talking about, and they're going to say, well, that's what that means. You're using it to describe that, and that's what that is, so that's what that means, at least when you use it.
But that's not what the New Testament authors meant when they used the word. In fact, when they used the word, they were thinking of something akin to trust, active trust, often based on evidence, okay?
Right, trust in God, trust in the Bible, believe it because you believe it because you feel it, believe it because the Bible says it. It's belief without evidence. Use the word trust, who gives a shit? All that would mean is that the Christian definition of the word trust is different from everybody else's. Nothing changed, the situation is the same. You think you're playing a very clever shell game, but the cups are transparent.
And so, when talking with unbelievers, I do my best to use the word trust instead of faith.
I wonder how well this actually works. How many people don't see through this? Maybe there's someone out there who can fall for this bullshit dissimulation. I would hope, though, that in most situations, when you actually say what you mean by trust, people go, wait a second, you just mean faith. Why are you using this weird word for the same thing when what you really want to say is faith, and you could just tell me what you mean by that? I will say, though, to an extent this video is a bit encouraging. The fact that you have to search for new ways to talk about your religion because the old ways sound so bad to so many people is probably a good sign. Also kind of pathetic.
Now, in the same way, this four-letter H word carries with it a lot of baggage. It conjures up images of red devils and pitchforks and torture racks and burning bodies, and the list goes on and on.
Oh, so the problem is not that people have an issue with the fundamental concept, the issue is aesthetic? You don't want people to think about red devils and pitchforks? So those quotes from before about the actual conflicts within your religion, the conflict between the loving God and the condemnation to eternal suffering, the issue was more just that they had an image in their head of guys with little horns on their heads and pointy tails? You sure about that? Because it didn't sound like that was the issue at all. In fact, what you're talking about doesn't even sound like the Christian idea of hell at all. It doesn't sound like what those people were objecting to. What you're talking about sounds like the toned-down cartoon version of hell you would see in The Simpsons.
Our ideas of hell often look more like something out of the TV show The Good Place.
I don't know what that is.
Than The Good Book, right? And so we got to clear this up. How do we do that? Well, instead, I think we should substitute a different phrase.
Yeah, right, exactly. Our ideas are not doing us any favors winning converts, so I think that we should just use a different word, but keep believing and promoting the exact same thing. Yeah, that'll fix the problem long term.
Now, please hear me. Please hear me. The goal isn't to soften the original meaning. It's not to air condition hell. That's not what I'm about here.
Yeah, I know. It's just to use a euphemism when you talk about it. That should buy you an extra 5 minutes of relevance, right? Before even the dumbest of people figure it out.
But rather, it's to help focus the conversation, bring clarity rather than confusion.
No, Tim, if you wanted to bring clarity, you'd say what you mean. You wouldn't be looking for new words for the same thing. You wouldn't be looking for something that tests better, a mott to retreat to that's easier to defend, something that's less distasteful. You'd say, hey, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. Convert, sinner. That's clarity. What you're looking for is anything but clarity. Now, of course, you'd never admit it, but again, just like faith, just like hell, what you insist you're saying is kind of hard to believe given what you actually say in the rest of the conversation.
So, the first part of our strategy is watch your language. Don't talk about hell.
Convert or else, sinner. Or else what? Or else you'll, yeah.
Now you're thinking, don't talk about hell. This is a conference on hell and apologetics. So what do we talk about, right? What do we talk about?
I don't know, Tim. Maybe you should just stop talking.
Here's what we talk about. The same thing the disciples talked about. We talk about final judgment.
Look at this, boss. 83% of test subjects preferred final judgment over hell. I estimate we could increase sales by at least 17%.
So here's the second step in our strategy. Watch your language. Now focus on final judgment.
Convert or else, sinner. Or else what? Or else you'll have final judgment. Oh, and what happens if that happens? Yeah.
Focus on final judgment. If you read through the book of Acts, the word hell or Gehenna, it doesn't show up a single time, okay? Instead, the apostles spoke about coming judgment, Acts 24, a day on which Jesus would judge the world in righteousness, Acts 17. The early disciples were commanded, actually by Jesus, to preach that Jesus was the one appointed by God to be the judge of the living and the dead.
So, okay. Citizens, we've created a new law. Here it is. Don't murder people. Yay! So, what'll happen if someone murders someone? Oh, well, get this. You're gonna love this. We had Tim in marketing come up with this one. A judge will judge them. And then what? Well, yeah. So all that's gonna happen is a judge is gonna cluck his tongue at me? No. Stuff will happen. Yeah, lot of stuff will happen. What stuff? Well, I'm not supposed to talk about it. Tim said it didn't test well.
So the emphasis is on final judgment meted out by the judge, who would be Jesus. That was what they argued.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the strategy here, Tim. Part of the appeal of Christianity was the pants-shitting terror, and I'm just not getting that anymore. I'm getting kind of a mild unease. No, that's too strong. I think it's more of a feeling of slight potential ominousness. What I'm trying to get at, Tim, is I think you're cutting Christianity's balls off. So I'm in favor of it. Thanks.
Now remember, these are people who were trained personally by Jesus, okay? And that's the way they talked about hell. They talked about final judgment.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder why people later on felt the need to up the ante.
So the apostles, they focused on final judgment. And here's, I think, why. Here's why. When a patient comes into an ER, and let's say they have a scraped knee, and they have a sprained ankle, and they have a gunshot wound to the chest, what injury do they treat first?
The gunman being judgmental about them. I believe that's the answer we're going for here.
This is not a trick question, okay? It's not a trick question. Of course, they treat the gunshot wound to the chest. They prioritize the serious injury first.
Okay, this is going to take forever. I've cut a bunch of these pointless tangents out already, and there's a lot more of them too. This guy was really desperate to fill an hour. He doesn't exactly have a lot to talk about, so time to skip another one, at least until the actual point.
Is hell unessential? Paul makes it clear that final judgment is essential. Exactly what final punishment entails is a separate question. Is the fire literal or metaphorical? Is it torture or is it torment? Is the punishment physical or is it psychological? Or maybe it's both. Here's my point.
About time. It only took you about 7 or 8 minutes to get to it.
Faithful Christians disagree on the nature of hell.
Yeah, but the point remains the same. Convert or suffer in hell, sinner! It's the same message. It doesn't matter if it's literal fire, metaphorical fire, physical torture, psychological torture, torture or torment. What's the difference? It's still the same general idea with the same problems. This final judgment you talk about, in your opinion, comes with a sentence to hell if you don't believe. The entire system, regardless, is still in conflict with the loving God.
I mean, more recently, there's a growing debate over the duration of the punishment, this final punishment. Does the punishment end in annihilation eventually? Or is it experienced forever, consciously?
Well, your ministry thinks forever, and of course that's what you want to downplay here. It's still a problem if it's not, I would say, but certainly not as much of one. But I don't see you converting your church into a church that believes that the punishment is not eternal, right? That's not on the docket. If you're not mentioning that part when you talk about hell, you're just self-censoring for the sake of looking better to people. If you're intentionally withholding that information, you're just being dishonest.
Again, the details are debated amongst brothers and sisters in Christ. Here's what's not debated. There will be a final judgment, and it will not be pretty. It will not be pretty.
Right, whether you say hell, whether you say final judgment, you're still talking about the same thing. You're still talking about a very bad end result for people. That's what you want them to believe. That's the threat to scare them into believing you and to keep them in line. Why don't you just own it? Why are you so nervous about it? Why are you giving an entire speech about why people shouldn't talk about it? About why you should convey the exact same message for the exact same reason, but just rebrand it to be more palatable. Change the color scheme, change the font, put a talking animal with sunglasses and a skateboard on the front. Are you really this desperate? Is attendance at your church really that far down? I mean, I know you have coronavirus, so it's all virtual, but is this really such a big problem for you that you have to take this laughable step? Man, I didn't realize the religion was doing so badly. I did not expect this video to be cause for optimism.
When we're talking with unbelievers, we can do an end run around how God punishes, and that's often what people bring up, right? Those are often the challenges. How can God allow, an infinite amount of suffering in hell forever, this kind of thing, for a finite number of crimes?
Oh, that's certainly part of it, probably the worst of it. The stuff your church believes.
Now what I do is I do an end run around the nature of hell discussion. And what I do is I focus in on that God judges, the essential, the primary issue.
Right, so an atheist is talking to you, and an atheist brings up, how can an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God inflict on his beloved children eternal suffering in hell for finite crimes? An atheist brings that up to you, and your response now is what? Now that's not the point. The point is that God judges. No, that is the point. That was the point they raised. We understand that you think God judges people. We're atheists. We don't believe that in the first place. It's kind of irrelevant. The point is what you think he sentences them to and what you're willing to defend. What you think is acceptable. It's not about God. It's not about whether God judges people. We don't believe God exists. I don't care if you think he judges people. What I care about, and what most atheists care about who are asking you about these topics, is either the contradictions in your belief system to try to argue against the religion by putting cracks in it, or, in this case more importantly, the depths you're willing to sink to protect your religion. It's not about God, it's about your beliefs and about you. That's what the atheist response to Christianity and every other religion was always about. So you just trying to change the subject, trying to retreat to some position you find easier to talk about, doesn't really help you. It shows your weakness, your inability to defend this. As you were talking about before, it's hard to defend, it's burdensome to believe. And so what you're saying is, just don't bother, try to stay on more solid ground. But in a situation like what you're presenting, where you're asked a question like this point blank, to stay on solid ground is going to involve you turning tail and running away. The solid ground's back that way, man. This is the swamp. After so much arguing with people about hell, it really is funny to see one of you just basically advocating to give up. This is hard to defend, it's burdensome to believe, it doesn't help our cause, just don't even fight the battle, just run away. Try to divert the conversation onto something else, hopefully that works.
In other words, bypass the nature of hell debate and focus on something that brothers and sisters in Christ all agree on, and something that's frankly more important: final justice, final judgment.
Right, so they ask about hell, they ask about the eternal torture in hell, and you say, the more important point is that God will judge you. And then they say, okay, he'll judge me, and then what? And then you say, yeah. Yeah, Tim, this seems like a winner. Please do this one. How do these not go hand in hand? Like, okay, you convince someone that God's gonna judge them. How is that more important than discussing the consequence of that? What that judgment entails, what the consequences are gonna be. Like, if it's just gonna be a disapproving look, nobody cares. What have you accomplished by convincing someone of this?
Let's say the challenge of hell comes up, this idea of eternal conscious torment comes up in conversation with an unbeliever. I may say to them, well, I could be mistaken on this.
Okay, I'm glad you're open-minded, but that's how you believe it is, so what if you're not mistaken? That's all it takes. Now we're back onto the conversation. Tim, this is stupid. Unless you're willing to concede that you don't believe that anymore because it doesn't make any sense, the conversation is not over. They're just going to ask that question again, I would hope. At least someone with any experience is going to do that.
In fact, there are faithful Christians who disagree with me, and they make the case from the Bible that hell isn't experienced forever.
Then when I'm talking to them, we'll talk about that. When I'm talking to a Christian like that, we probably won't have a conversation about eternal conscious torment in hell. But when I'm talking to you, why are you trying to deflect by pointing out the fact that people who don't agree with you exist? Yeah, I know. It's not about them. It's a conversation with you. Different ideas exist. Tons of different religious ideas exist. That doesn't resolve the contradictions. That doesn't make your approval of this less disgusting. It doesn't change anything. What on earth do you think you're accomplishing with this?
But whatever the view of hell looks like in the end, you don't want to be there, okay?
Right, you want to say the same thing, you want to use the same scare tactics, you just want to soften it up, you want to air condition hell. You want to pretend that because somebody else thinks hell is a soft, nice, wonderful place, or not eternal, or whatever, that therefore your beliefs are not a problem. Somebody else thinks something I don't think, so stop asking me about what I do think. Tim, this is incredibly ridiculous.
And so here's my appeal. My appeal
is this.
Is to the diversity of views the Christian family has.
Yeah, water it down, Tim, water it down. There's no need to be some kind of a fundamentalist about this, is there? If it's not popular, just stop defending it and stop talking about it.
Part of our job is to address these obstacles to the faith.
After all, there are disagreements between Christians on this issue. What's next? Are you going to tell Alan Schleman and Greg Kuchel that they should stop talking about anti-gay stuff all the time on your website? I don't think that's testing real well either these days. Really, it'd probably just be better to embrace the gay.
I think this is the wise approach. I think this is the wise approach, not to get hung up on these tertiary and secondary issues.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. When someone asks you about something that makes you uncomfortable, just say, I don't want to defend that position. It's not that important anyway. Forget it. Please become a Christian, though. If you don't, it's totally gonna suck for some reason. I don't know. Also, don't be gay, because, By
the way, somebody might say, well, Tim, you're compromising. You're being a compromiser.
No. Who would possibly say that? No, you're being a coward. It's funny as shit.
I actually don't think this is compromise. This is humility. This is maturity. Listen, most battles that you could fight, you shouldn't fight.
Picking your battles is one thing. Avoiding the issue altogether when someone directly asks you about it is another. Look, I get you say something and somebody asks you about it, asks you for some robust defense of it, and you're just like, you know what? Sorry, I don't have time, I don't have the energy, whatever. I'm not going to do that right now. That's one thing, right? That's a situational issue. I don't fault people for that. I've done that myself. But what I wouldn't do is stand up on a stage and tell people, hey, every atheist, here's an issue that I think is a really hard issue for atheism. I think you should not address it because really it's not that important anyway. What is important is there's no God, and you should just say that. Do an end run around the question. When someone asks you this super tough question about atheism, just go, you know what? I really want to draw the conversation back to the core point. God don't real, bro. And also, there's atheists who disagree with me on this issue, so really you should just stop asking me what I think about it. Please. Why would I advise that? You're presenting this as a strategy. You've used the word strategy many times, and it is a strategy, I can't dispute that, but just because it is a strategy doesn't make it a good one.
It actually takes more strength to show self-control when those kinds of issues come up.
Oh yes, you're just radiating power right now. As an unbeliever who might ask such a question, I'm cowering in your presence.
Pick your battles, right? Don't die on every hill. We die on the most important hills.
I'm glad you have the humility to admit that you tend to die on the hills you pick. Alright, I think I'm going to come back to this. I'm not 100% sure yet, but there's a lot more interesting stuff that I want to get to that's not actually this exact same topic. Because Tim kind of gets into arguing against atheism a bit, and from the looks of it, there's some stuff there that might be fun, so I might take a look at that. I also might not. I follow my whims where they take me. We'll see. Thank you for watching. Before you go, please do give the video a like and click subscribe if you haven't. Huge thanks to every single supporter on any platform. For early access to videos, sign up to my email list at list.logicked.com. And I will see you next time.